Welcome to the Dr. Mama Says podcast, where you will hear a variety of timeless tips on parenting and healthcare. Thank you so much for joining today, and now it's time to get on with the show.
Hey everyone, Happy New Year. It's been a minute since I've shared an episode, but I've been taking some time to just enjoy and appreciate life. But I'm back. So yeah, I'm Dr. Burton, the host and creator of the Dr. Mama Says podcast, where I share my timeless tips on parenting and healthcare. And I think I want to start the year off by talking about one of my favorite parenting talking points. And what is that, you ask? Well, it's the excessive use of electronics by kids. But this time I get to share my parenting tips and mix that with some healthcare tips all in the same post. Woohoo, look at that. So use of electronics has skyrocketed for both kids and adults. I mean, iPhones, smartphones, tablets, computers, they're everywhere. There's no doubt that this increased technology has improved all of our lives, but it also has a downside. When you get the chance, feel free to check out the show notes where I've added a lot of helpful links to talk about articles and studies that are going to back up some of the things that I'm sharing today. Sometimes it's easier just to go back, click on the link, and look for more details to help you better understand the summary. So on my website and other posts, I've already shared my thoughts about the increasing use of electronics, and it's an epidemic, and how it's distracting many parents when they come to visit the physician. Yes, this continues to impact me every single day when I'm trying to share medical information and I'm constantly competing for attention from the devices in the room, in both parents and kids. I mean, seriously. I am only in the room with families for 15 to 20 minutes. Is it really too much to ask for that amount of undivided attention? I do the best I can, but I know I don't have the focus I used to have from my patients. Also, I've shared in another post some ideas parents could consider to use to avoid electronics at the doctor's office. These are not rocket science ideas. They are not novel or new, but they're just more of a gentle reminder that kids were able to be entertained before the digital age came. So today, I want to share some of the potential electronic device complications that are becoming more common in kids who use excessive screen time. To be fair, I did not have to walk this walk since my kids were raised in the 90s, and that was a time that the electronic device movement and constant internet access was just beginning. But even back then, kids loved screen time, and I had rules about when they could watch TV and when they could use their computer. There were no TVs in their rooms, and the computer was in the family room. Screens have always been a draw for kids. The issue now is that screens are everywhere, so parents have to work much harder to prevent screen addiction. It's hard, but not impossible. Kids today are surrounded by technology and cannot imagine a world without a smartphone, tablet, or internet access. In fact, many young kids become frustrated when they are not provided a free Wi-Fi password wherever they go. As an aside, parents, please teach your kids that they do not get Wi-Fi access everywhere. They need a plan for what to do when they don't have Wi-Fi. Repeatedly interrupting the doctor to ask why they cannot use the Wi-Fi that I'm using? No. I get that Starbucks has free Wi-Fi and some physician offices also offer it. But when an office says it's not available, that's the answer, and we need to keep it moving. In fact, I would love a little help from parents in supporting me in this instead of me having to continue to answer kids who tell me it's not fair that I get to use the Wi-Fi and they don't. This should already be a lesson that kids learn, but I digress. Anyway, parenting during the digital age is hard. The endless use of digital devices for entertainment and academic reasons, it makes it easy to get unlimited screen time. And all this technology access means that young parents today may be the first generation who truly needs to figure out how to limit screen time in kids. Because of the growing concern, the American Academy of Pediatrics has put out a recommendation to how to limit screen time. And this is so that they're trying to avoid the potential complications that I'm going to talk about. I added the exact recommendations in the show notes, but the basic summary is that screen time should be avoided altogether in kids under 18 months, unless they're using it for video chatting. No use under 18 months. Between 18 months and 2 years, the digital media should be high-quality programming, and parents should be watching it with their kids to help them understand what they're seeing, not just letting them interact with it on their own. Kids between age 2 and 5 should have the screen limits of about an hour or so a day. Again, high-quality programs of educational value, best watched with an adult. Over the age of 6, this is where the more variable amount of screen time comes in, but there should be some consistent limits. Whatever your limits are, make them consistent and make sure that the media does not take the place of getting good sleep, physical activity, or social interactions with family and friends. Let me just add here a little story because recently we were on vacation and went to a restaurant, and at the table next to us was a family, and all the adults were laughing and talking and interacting, and there was this little school-aged boy sitting there quietly watching a video on an iPhone that was propped up on a salt shaker. He was mindlessly eating the food on his plate. He was looking up at nobody, talking to nobody. He did not interact at all with the family. I get it. Eating out with kids is hard. I remember having to entertain my kids with crayons and books and toys while we waited for food. And then when the food came, I had to cut their food, help feed them. And then I had to quickly scarf down my cold food before we left the restaurant. It was not pretty. And often it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun for me, but my kids loved it. They have all these great memories of eating out at restaurants. So for those of you who have not given much thought to your kids using a phone or a tablet while you enjoy your meal in peace, now might be a good time to rethink that. Think of other ways to engage your kids during the family time instead of them essentially being isolated alone with their device. 10 years ago, the Kaiser Family Foundation did a study and began reporting that kids over the age of 8 were spending about 7 hours on electronic devices. They also found out at the same time adults were on screens 11 hours a day. I can only imagine what a study this decade is going to reveal. So as a bit of research before I began recording this episode, I decided to do a quick survey of electronic use in kids during a routine morning visit in my office. I picked a morning and I carried around a notepad. Yes, I'm old school. I actually had a notepad that had columns written on it so that I could go in and quickly mark down some entries to keep track of what I witnessed. I simply recorded my observations with parents and kids who were using electronics that morning. I wanted to see if the numbers are actually as large as I thought they were. And as it turned out, it was actually less than I see on some days. So take this information for what it's worth. A random morning in the life of patients seen by me. I saw 16 families. 50% of the parents were either talking on their phones when I entered, or they texted, typed, or somehow interacted their phones while I was speaking with them. Something that I did not see on that day that I do see in other days is a group of parents who simply hold their phones in their hand or on their laps during the entire visit. And although they don't use it, they do frequently check it. Their eyes dart down to look at the screen to make sure they didn't miss anything. News flash, this still counts as you being distracted by your phone. Yes, it does. Put the phone away. Anyway, of the 16 patients, 8 of them were under age 2, and 6 of them had their parents' phone during the visit. And when the phone was moved away from the child, every single one of these young kids became agitated, crying, swinging their arms, swiping at the phone. Not one of these young kids had headphones, and all 6 of them had the phone volume turned up for me to hear whatever they were listening to. 4 patients seen that day were between the ages of 3 and 5. All of them used a cell phone or a tablet. 2 of them had the volume turned up and became disruptive when the device was turned off or removed. I did appreciate the 2 who simply sat in the chair as instructed and didn't fuss when the parent took the phone away. 4 of the patients were over age 12. 2 of them had their own cell phones. On this day, no headphones were used as the kids were just texting and swiping. But sometimes I do have kids that come in with their headphones, and it's a problem because I have to ask them to remove the headphones so that we can talk. Also on this particular day, no kids were noted to have any physical books, crayons, or toys to play with. Sometimes I still see these items, books, dolls, trucks, brought in to entertain the kids, but not nearly as much as the phones and the tablets. This just happened to be an only electronic day. And I always make a point to gush all over the kids who have books and crayons and markers. It's just my little contribution to rewarding things that can help them to kick the habit of wanting screens all the time. So my summary of this random survey showed that out of 16 kids, 12 were using electronic devices. This frequency probably is mirrored in society at large and might help to explain the increasing number of electronic complications from excessive use. So what is excessive electronic use? Every parent has their own criteria about what they think it is, but based on the recommendations I just shared from the Academy of Pediatrics, I could say that nearly all of my patients seem to exceed these recommendations, especially in kids under 18 months. There has been and probably will continue to be a lot of debate and articles on this subject. They will tell you whatever you want them to say. The internet is like that. It's easy to find articles that support whatever you want them to, but then it's just as easy to ignore the ones that don't. Understanding the source of the information is important. This might come as a shock to you, but everything on the internet is not equal. For instance, physicians will tell you that smoking is bad and causes cancer and heart disease, even though you might have a 100-year-old uncle who smokes 2 packs a day and is extremely healthy. Many people can take that risk and celebrate their successes, but they understand that they beat the odds. Back in the day, with cigarettes and vending machines and smoke everywhere and restaurants and planes, we didn't know the risk. Now we know better, so we opt to reduce our risk. Finding an exception to a scientifically backed rule should not be your means of making decisions. This is the same process occurring right now with e-cigarettes and the limits that are being placed on Juul and vaping products. And of course, the ongoing, might I add, ridiculous vaccine debate. Simply put, vaccines work. They do not cause autism. They prevent disease and save lives. Actually, let me share something right here. I just read this in a journal, and the author said vaccines do not save lives. Vaccination saves lives. Vaccines that stay in the vial and are not given to any patients, well, they're not effective at all. That's some good old nerd humor. I like that. Anyway, the science is clear, and one of my colleagues just recently published an outstanding book that will help you to understand it better. Of course, there's a link to the book in the show notes. Anyway, my main concern is that people need to understand the risks and then make their own decisions. That, my friends, is Parenting 101. Life is always about choices and understanding both sides of the argument. Then you make your own decisions and keep it moving. Your child may respond differently than others, but at least you knew the true risks. Risks based on science and research, not the risks you learn from a Facebook group or a neighbor or a friend of a friend's. But if you never knew the true risks, you might feel that you did not make an informed decision. This podcast episode, it's me pointing out the bad things that might happen to your child. Or it may not. Excessive screen time has real risks and has the potential to lead to significant complications. You need to know this. Now, before I list these potential complications, I want to share one other thing that I learned recently, and that's toddlers interact better with paper books than ebooks. There is a growing trend of buying ebooks compared to paper physical books. Digital books are cheaper and they need less storage space, so their popularity is growing. But a new study shows that toddlers have more conversations about what they saw, and the parents ask more interactive questions when reading physical books. When using electronic devices, more of the interactions had to do with how to swipe or tap or listening to the sounds instead of about the story or the characters. Some parents feel that they are being unfairly targeted for excessive screen time use in their kids. Everyone knows that parenting is hard and screens are a great benefit in making life easier. Yes, screens are easier and loved by kids, but understanding the research behind some of the recommendations may help you to change that feeling. Healthcare professionals are not trying to make things harder for parents, but they want to help them focus on activities that encourage better interactions with their kids. These interactions are what lead to improved development in the long term. While I'm still on my research quoting mode, did you know that reading to infants and toddlers is also good for adults? Yeah, you might want to check out that link because it is. And since parenting is hard enough, why not take advantage of that little extra bonus? Now on to the meat of this podcast. Here are 10 electronic device complications that have been studied. Obesity. Well, kids are inactive a lot more, staring at their screens. They're not burning those calories. They've got a sedentary lifestyle and they gain more weight. It's also by watching screens and mindlessly eating, they develop poor eating habits. There's sleep disturbances because looking at screens before bed can disrupt the sleep cycles. More screen time use is associated with the increased risks of kids becoming a bully or becoming a cyberbully victim. There's also increased academic problems. Kids who spend too much time on their screens have been shown to do worse on academic testing, especially when video games and TV make up the bulk of their screen use. There's an increased tendency for violence because kids are often exposed to violent media and movies and videos at really a young age, and they become desensitized to the violence. Sometimes they just imitate what they see and they use violence to solve their problems. There can be behavioral problems, which is common because of sensory overload and overstimulation. They have trouble paying attention, thinking clearly, and can become more impulsive and moody. There's also a clear language delay that's been noted, especially in the infants and toddlers exposed to excessive screen. Vision changes. Yes, there's something called digital eye strain that happens when kids look at things up close for a prolonged period of time. There's a growing trend for kids to need glasses at a much earlier age due to excessive screen time. There's also increased mental health challenges with increased anxiety and depression in young kids and teens. And finally, the last potential complication is poor brain development. This was a big surprise to me. But yes, lower brain development may be one of the electronic device complications in infants and toddlers with excessive screen time. A really fancy, prestigious pediatric journal recently published an eye-opening, potentially sobering study that all parents need to be aware of. It's a small study, and it was aimed at evaluating the development of the part of the brain associated with language, reading, and writing. Even though there need to be further studies to examine more details, there was evidence of reduced brain development, which could impact long-term learning in toddlers who use screen for more than the recommended time. Researchers have found that kids often start using screen before the age of 1, very commonly by age 2 to 3 months. And now with screens following kids everywhere, the amount of screen time in young developing brains has become staggering. I added a link to a physician's page who's a screen time expert and has done extensive research and believes that young brains with excessive screen time can show atrophy or shrinkage. The fact that younger and younger kids are using electronics has a potential impact for significant developmental concerns that may not be noted for another 20 years. We need to stop it while we can. And of course, all experts do not agree. As I said, there will always be supporting information that you can find to justify your actions or beliefs. But you should take a look and see at how many other people have the same unpopular opinion. There are clearly experts who are not convinced that excessive screen time is bad, and I included a link to a post about this just to help round out the topic. But as you search on Google, consider how hard it is to find reports of professionals saying that they don't think screen time is a problem. Okay then, this looks like a great place to stop. I hope I inspired you to look further into the impact screens may have on kids. And if you liked what you heard, I would love for you to share this episode with a friend or a family member. But for now, I gotta go. Thanks so much for tuning in and hope you come back to check out another episode soon.
I truly want to thank you for spending your time listening to Dr. Mama Says, because without you, there would be no podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you go to listen to your podcast and consider leaving a 5-star rating. This will help gain the support needed to continue bringing new and exciting content. To review information presented in any episode, a summary of the show can always be found online at drmamasays.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you've not done so already. Hope you come back and listen again soon.